Hi, I'm Jonathan Grapsis from Flat Earth Direct. It's about this time of the year that we start planning for our Christmas and holiday appeals. So I thought it was be a nice timely post to start thinking about the fundamentals behind a really strong and powerful appeal. I'll talk mostly about the DM or offline world, but at the end I'll talk a little bit about how you can get your online talking to your offline to make sure that you maximise income at this time of the year. First thing I want to talk about is keeping it real. I think one of the most important things that you can do is make sure that your appeal or your letter looks and feels like a real letter. Make sure it's authentic. I think we often get carried away by trying to invent or think about heavily designed pieces that need to go in the pack. But some of the most powerful lift and supporting pieces I've ever seen worked in an appeal are things as simple as a photocopy of a memo or an email or an article that was released recently talking about the situation that you're focusing on in the appeal. So think through the elements of pack in terms of how do I make this feel and look like a real personal letter to somebody. The second point is keeping it focused. Talk about one thing and one thing only. What is the single most important thing that you want that supporter to do right then? It's really easy to get distracted and ask people to do 3 or 4 or 5 things that you consider really important at this particular time. The challenge there and the danger you run is that you paralyse people with too much choice. So focus on one thing and one thing only. It would be remiss of me not to talk about data. So what I'd say here is make sure you get to understand who your supporters are that you're talking to. You've probably heard it before, but the biggest driver of what somebody's going to do in the future is what they've done in the past. So given that you hold information about what your donors have done, make sure you use it to your advantage. Obviously, we're talking about transactional history and how you base what you're asking somebody on what they've done in the past, but also think about some of the softer data that you might have captured. Why did somebody first support you? What area of your work are they particularly interested in? And make references to that in relation to what the appeal is talking about. It really gives you a stronger connection with that individual, and ultimately that gives you a better chance of getting them to respond. Talk a lot about making it easy, and I want to break this down into 2 facets here. Make it easy for people to understand what you're asking them to do and what you're talking to them about in the letter, and make it easy to respond. I've mentioned a couple of times before that one of the best pieces of advice I was given was that you want people to be nodding the letter in agreement when they're reading it. In other words, it's really easy for them to understand the logic behind what you're saying. It might be slightly uncomfortable, but at the same time, they get it and they can read it really easily. And of course, in any direct response, make it incredibly easy for people to actually do what you're asking them to do, which in this particular time of the year is probably asking them to give a one-time cash gift. Make it clear, give them a full-page response form if you can, but whatever you do, make sure that the process is incredibly streamlined and simple. Let's talk a little bit about online. It's simply not good enough or not acceptable now just to think that having a donation page and a donate now button on your homepage is going to attract lots of donors from this appeal. What you need to do is think through the journey that people might take. So if somebody's received your offline appeal and they go into a search engine like Google to try and find you, are you doing everything you possibly can to get found by that individual? Are you running Google AdWords campaigns to support your offline appeal to make sure that if people are going in there searching using keywords, they're able to easily find you? When they get to your website, make sure there's a really clearly displayed banner telling people this is our most recent appeal, please support it. Have the full appeal on the website so that people can see exactly the same message as what they saw in the offline piece. You read an appeal and the CEO is telling you how incredibly urgent it is, and all of a sudden you go onto the website and you can't find it, or you find a snippet of what you received in the post. Make sure there's some consistency in terms of what you're asking people to do. Even consider testing personalised URLs. So in other words, if you're sending somebody to your website, test whether actually sending them to their own personal donation page is more effective and is more likely to get the same level of gift than just sending them to a generic donation page. And the last thing I'll talk about is the follow-up process. Make sure you think through the follow-up and acknowledgement strategy when you're actually planning for this appeal. So it's not an afterthought. Thank you letters are an incredibly important part of the process, and you need to make sure that you feed back and close the loop to supporters so they feel as if you've genuinely appreciated them and they have an understanding of what they've helped you achieve. Don't do it, as I said, at the last minute. Make sure in the planning stages you're really thinking through what happens when somebody responds. If they give a gift over a certain level, do I get the executive director to give them a call? If somebody hasn't responded by a certain date, but they gave last year, should we give them a call and ask them to consider supporting at this time of the year? That's it from me. 6 tips hopefully for you to use in this year's holiday or Christmas appeal. I hope they're really successful, and I'd love to hear some feedback and how you go. Thanks very much. Stay in touch.